Welcome, everyone, to the MMA Happy Hour podcast. I am Kyle Anthony, your host for today. We are talking UFC 325, headlined by Alexander Volkanovski and Diego Lopez. We're going to be breaking down 4 plays here on the show today. Now, listen, we are coming off a not-so-good night last weekend at UFC 324. Now, Paddy Pimblett could have saved the day, cleaned a lot of the mess up, but boy, he fought really, really stupid. Now, I don't like to get into the past weekend, whether we win, whether we lose. We've got too many things to talk about for this coming weekend. We got to just keep going as there's an event after event after event. But I got to give my 2 cents here. And the fact that Paddy Pimblett didn't shoot takedowns in a fight that is the biggest fight of his career, didn't look to really kind of implement it, whether he's just looking for takedowns to kind of just mix it up a little bit, give, Gaethje a different look. He just didn't do it. And, I don't know whose game plan it was. I don't know if it's Paddy's game plan, his team's game plan, but somebody really screwed it up. Somebody sold the bag there because it was a terrible performance. Yes, it was a war. I get all those things. Yes, it was a back and forth battle. Not even saying that if Paddy got the takedowns, he wins the fight. I'm not even trying to get to that point. But what I'm saying is that you're not using your strength. You're not using your best weapon in a title fight that's going to change the entire trajectory of your career. He didn't want to do it. Very, very odd. It was really late in the fight, rounds 4, rounds 5, where he started to get really desperate, looking for takedowns. But at that point, his face was smashed in, and he didn't have the energy to do it. Gaethje fought smart, and he gave Gaethje the fight he wanted. If Gaethje said, "Hey, if they asked Gaethje, what kind of fight would you want?" You're like, "Oh, I love a toe-to-toe boxing match." That's exactly what Paddy gave him. So, credit to Gaethje on getting the victory. But we have things to take care of this Saturday. UFC 325 locked in. Have plays in for clients right now. If you want to become a client, link down in the description. Also, check it out down below. We do have still the promotion for our sponsor here on the MMA Happy Hour podcast, Four Cedar Sportsbook. Take a look down below. Very, very generous offer. And with that being said, let's dive into the main event of the evening between Alexander Volkanovski and Diego Lopez. Now, we've got Volkanovski sitting around -145 in the comeback here. We've got Diego Lopez +122. Now, this is a rematch from their fight back in April of last year. And it was a fight where we did have a 4-unit play on Volkanovski at around -130. Cashed us a nice ticket overall. And really the perception, of that fight after the fact, and even I'm hearing some people now, is, close fight. With some close rounds, later on, Diego kind of, really was taking it to him, showing good cardio. He was starting to come alive later in the fight, walking, Volkanovski down. And I couldn't disagree more. I couldn't disagree more with any of that, because you look really at, with your eyeballs at the fight. But not only that, you look at stylistically, statistically speaking, it was all Volkanovski. And, you look at the significant strikes landed, 158 to 63, obviously favoring Volkanovski in that fight. But you look at the rounds, and that even just tells the story even more, because you had, 2 judges gave it 4-1 rounds in favor of Volkanovski. 1 judge gave 3-2. I definitely gave the 4-1 when I was judging it myself. But you have the first round. Volkanovski landed 27 strikes to Lopez's 8. Did have a takedown in that first round. Second round was the closest round and the best round really for Lopez. It was 24-16, significant strikes favoring Volkanovski, but you did have the big moment where Lopez landed a big shot, dropped him, so obviously that's a round for him. But after that, it was pretty much all, in my opinion, Volkanovski. You had the round 3 was 25-9, significant strikes favoring Volkanovski. Round 4 was 39-16, favoring Volkanovski. And round 5 was 43-14 on significant strikes. Now, was Lopez moving forward? Sure, later in the fight, but he was getting lit up. He has no striking defense, and that's a big issue here. And that's kind of what I'm looking at here is what's changed. What has changed in this fight that you're going to say, hey, this is a big spot that Lopez is going to, besides for one big shot, what else does he have to offer in this fight here? And the biggest thing here, I think that if there is a a concern on the Volkanovski side is the age. There's no doubt that he's now 37 years old. You've got Lopez at 31. That is going to be a concern here. We know these lower weight classes, things can change, obviously, and that's part of it. But the other part is he slowing down? Are we seeing him slow down? Is he getting worse? And we're not seeing it. We just saw him fight, 10 months ago, whatever it was, and we didn't see that. He has cardio look good. His durability actually held up there too, where, he was hurt early, but he was able to kind of get out of it, get his wits back with him and just continue to just land shots on Lopez over the 5 rounds. And I thought that was a great telling sign about his durability, because that obviously was a concern also going into that fight was, he's been knocked out a couple times recently. That's a big concern. But you also look at the fact that he has had 17 career UFC fights. He's 14-3 over that span. The only people he's lost to are the pound for pound best fighters on the planet. You have Islam Makhachev. He lost to him twice, up a weight class. And he also lost to Ilia Topuria, who is an absolute world beater. So those are the people that he has lost to. And, do we put Lopez now in that spot? Yes, again, he is 37. That is a concern. But overall, do we put Lopez in the spot with Makhachev and Topuria? I don't really think so. I don't really think that is where we can put him, definitely, at least right now. Now, stylistically speaking, Volkanovski is the far better striker. There's just no doubt about it at all. He's got, great range, solid leg kicks, powerful leg kicks, good jab overall. And one of the biggest issues here that going back, rewatching that first fight, is the incredible footwork of Volkanovski. That just really made it extremely difficult for Lopez to find his range. He struggled getting into range. He struggled finding that distance and getting into a rhythm. He just struggled. He was swinging. He was missing a lot in that fight throughout the fight. And Volkanovski was just, pop, 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 land a couple nice shots, get out of range, get back in range, couple shots, get out of range. And the cardio that Volkanovski does have, he's able to do that. He's able to move around a lot. He's able to kind of bounce in and out and not just stand in the pocket and just throw with Lopez. And you even look at it, even further, Lopez was missing a lot. He only had a 32% striking accuracy, while you have Volkanovski with a 61% striking accuracy in that fight. So Lopez just couldn't get the distance, couldn't just kind of really let the hands go in the right spots. And that's really where, again, Volkanovski's footwork was a huge difference maker in that first fight. Now, no doubt Volkanovski is the more technical striker between these two guys overall and has faced by far the higher level strength of schedule between these two guys. And obviously, yes, Lopez is younger, he's coming up, all those things, but he has not faced anyone compared to the level of Volkanovski has had over his career. Yes, he beat Gene Silva. That is also part of this too. But now we can talk about the wrestling here. Now, that's a big part. Will Lopez look to wrestle? Yes, he got some takedowns against Silva, but Silva was doing a lot of spinning shit. He was missing. He was, completely, out of position. And that's where Lopez was smart. He was able to get takedowns. That's not Volkanovski. He isn't a risk taker. He's not doing these, spinning, jumping attacks. He's going to just do what he needs to do, outpoint him, stay safe, and win rounds. And that's why I don't think that Lopez is going to find takedowns here. He didn't even shoot a takedown in their first fight. You had Volkanovski, who did get the takedown, but was continually shooting. And I think that also is to slow down Lopez, get him working, because that's what I think about Lopez, is that he doesn't have the wrestling, ability to get the fight to the ground. He also doesn't have the cardio to fuel these repetitive takedowns either. So he's struggling with the wrestling skill and the cardio, and that forces him to stay on the feet. And I think that's, again, where Volkanovski does his best work overall. And I think as this fight goes, you're going to see Volkanovski continually take over the fight as this fight wears on here. And we're getting a good line here. We're basically getting almost the same line that we were getting in their first fight, and we're getting the same line. And, I think it's just a great price. I think it's a very good price here. And yes, again, does Lopez have the kill shot ability? Yes, he does. Early on, sure. But I like that I'm seeing that Volkanovski got hurt, was able to bounce back, and I like that spot here. So I'm taking Alexander Volkanovski minus 145 to get the job done. Next fight here we're going to talk about is going to be Benoit Saint-Denis. He is minus 340 on the comeback here. We've got Dan Hooker. He is plus 230. 50. Now, you've got Dan Hooker here, who is a longtime UFC vet. He's an exciting fighter, 23 UFC fights overall. He's 14-9 over that span. And again, exciting fighter. He's fought a lot of high-level guys throughout his career. And pretty much, I would say, he's a journeyman fighter. He's a fun journeyman fighter. And anytime he fights the high-level guys, he can't seem to beat them. When he fights the lower-level guys, he does get some victories, and then he gets back up and fights a higher-level guy, can't get the victory. And that's kind of been his career. People love Dan Hooker. I'm a fan of him. He's a fun, exciting fighter. But I just think that this is we're kind of heading towards the end of his career overall. He just went out there and got absolutely battered by Arman Tsarukyan and then submitted in the second round. While Benoit Saint-Denis, I think, is a terrible matchup here, I think, for Dan Hooker overall. I think BSD's pressure-heavy wrestling style is going to cause a lot of problems here, I think, for Dan Hooker. He's very aggressive. He's going to stay in his space. He's going to push, relentless takedowns and really force you to fight in the clinch, and he's going to consistently do that over the 3 rounds. He's been able to overwhelm opponents, and that's really, what he's been able to do, where he's going to march forward. The God of War is going to throw a lot of damage and then look for those takedowns, look for the ability to get some brutal ground and pound going, or look for that submission ability. While Hooker here on the other side, I just think he's going to struggle defending takedowns. I think there's just a clear path here for BSD to get a takedown, control the action, and look for the finish. And, a lot of times we've seen over Dan Hooker's career, he's fought a lot of strikers. He just has. And over his last 2 fights, he did fight 2 primarily wrestlers. And, Arman Tsarukyan and Gamrot had 7 takedowns combined between these 2 guys. He did beat Gamrot, but the problem is there with Gamrot is that he's not dangerous. He's not a finisher. He's not a guy, he's just going to kind of just look to hold you down. And that's kind of what he's been able to do throughout his career. And that's where I'm seeing here that you look at, Gamrot over his last 5 wins. 4 of them are by decision. The only one that he did finish was Rafael Fiziev, which was a fight where Fiziev blew out his knee and early in the fight, and that counts as his finish. But besides for that, he's just more positional here. But where I'm going with it is the fact that the path is there. The takedowns are there. The wrestling is there. And that is really where I do think that he's going to be able to find a lot of opportunities here. And we do know that, Hooker, when he's on his back, struggles to get back up, doesn't have the ability to work back to his feet once he's taken down. Yes, he can scramble a little bit and work back, if he's up against a cage or something like that, but he's going to struggle really just creating that space and doesn't have the power to really keep BSD at bay. He doesn't really have, he's got some nice striking here. He's going to, have that ability. But I just think BSD is going to be able to crash the pocket and find opportunities to look for those takedowns. And the big red flag here for me on the Dan Hooker side, obviously he's the big underdog here, but on the Dan Hooker side is the fact that he fought 2 months ago against Arman Tsarukyan and got his face smashed in and submitted in the second round. And I think this quick turnaround time is a terrible, terrible, terrible thing for him coming into this fight. 2 months ago, if you go back and look at his face, he was just battered, beaten, and now we've got a quick turnaround time where he's fighting another guy who's going to look to take you down and look to maul you. And we know that, this is a guy that, has had a ton of MMA mileage. He's been in tons of wars. It's at a point now where this guy starts getting hit a little bit on his face. He starts getting busted open. His face starts to swell really quickly. And I think that's kind of what happens early in this fight when BSD is moving forward and looking for those takedowns, that he's going to start to batter him and beat him up very, very early. And out of BSD's 8 wins in the UFC, 4 are by submission. We've got Dan Hooker, out of his last 3 losses, 2 are by submission. So I think this quick turnaround time, I think the damage that he has taken over his career, the damage he took 2 months ago, I think is all piling up here. I don't think we're going to get, the best version here of Dan Hooker at this point here. So I think that BSD gets the takedown at some point, sinks in that submission here. So I'm going BSD by submission plus 165. And the next one here we're going to talk about is going to be Quinlan Salkild. He is minus 1,100 on the comeback here. We've got Jamie Malarkey. He is plus 600. Now, overall, I am very high on Quinlan Salkild. I think he is very well-rounded, a young, hyped, rising talent, I think, in the division overall. We did bet him against Nasrat Haqparast, where it was an absolutely brutal knockout victory for Quinlan Salkild, but he's got strong grappling. He's got submission ability. He's got some slick boxing. He's got some good hand speed, and he's got some wrestling. He can mix that in. Very explosive, and he's just going to be the better athlete between these two on Saturday night as well. While he's facing a 31-year-old Jamie Mullarkey, but Jamie Mullarkey's washed. Like let's be very, very clear here. He is just absolutely washed at this point. He's 31 years old, probably going on 51 MMA miles, MMA age, because he has just taken a ton of damage, and he has been beaten up in a lot of fights overall. And, he was able to go out there and save his job recently against Bedoya. Now, Bedoya is trash, not a very good fighter at all. Bedoya 0-4 in the UFC. But even the fact that he had a competitive fight against Bedoya is another bad sign here for Jamie Mullarkey overall and what he's going to be able to do. It was 46-43 on significant strikes. Even in that third round, Bedoya was landing big shots, hurting Mullarkey. Mullarkey was kind of running for his life, in that third round just to get through the fight. But I think this is not a good look for him, especially he just fought Bedoya. Now he's about to face Salkild, who has far more weapons, a lot more power, and a lot more finishing ability and more dangerous. And the biggest red flag on the Mullarkey side is his durability. And that's something that, I'm not telling you something you guys don't know. His durability is not good at all. He doesn't absorb shots very well. Anytime he gets, hit with something clean, it seems like he's already rocked. He is kind of trying to lean on that wrestling a little bit, try to save his chin, but he's very hittable. And he's a guy that once the fight starts getting going, he's not scared to get into the pocket, and he is very, very hittable. Even in wins, this guy gets rocked, wobbled, hurt multiple times, and he's able to kind of survive and then get that victory. But what we have seen overall is that if he's going to exchange in the pocket, he's going to be laid out. There is just no question about it overall, because striking wise, Mullarkey has many, many flaws. He's much slower developing combinations overall. He's very stiff, very upright, when he's in the exchanges there, leaves his chin on the center line on top of all of that. And he's got bad striking defense and all of these things here. I just don't see where Mullarkey survives here. I think this is just really setting up perfectly. Also, Mullarkey, I believe, is on coming in on short notice. But, this is also the fact that I don't really see him surviving here. I don't see him making it through. Quillen has, high level grappling, but boy, has he been able to find finishes over his Quillen's 3 UFC wins. 2 are by knockout. We've got the last 4 losses for Mullarkey all come by knockout, 2 in the first round, 2 in the second round here. And I think he's going to be very effective at range, have that power, land that kill shot. And I do like Quillen Salkild by knockout. And that's sitting around -130. And I think he gets the job done that way. And the last one here we're going to talk about is going to be an absolutely explosive fight between Jacob Malkoun and Torres Finney. Now, this is going to be it will be the most boring fight on the card. There's just no question about that overall. There's going to be limited offense. There's going to be both these guys kind of holding each other, pushing each other up against the fence, laying on each other when they get a takedown. And then once the guy gets up, the other one's going to try to do the same thing. That's kind of how we're going to see this fight pretty much play out. But with that being said, I do like a side in this fight overall. Now, there are a few concerns here on the Malkoun side, and especially being, a -162 favorite, these are some issues here that I think are pretty substantial overall. And I think that really is pushing me to the other side here. Now you've got Malkoun. The first thing being the fact is his inactivity. And this guy has not fought in nearly 2 years. That is a very long time. Last time he was in the cage was against Andre Petrovsky in March of 2024, where Petrovsky smashed his face up against Malkoun's hip bone, knocked himself out, which is ridiculous overall. But that already is an issue, where you've got a guy that just 2-year layoff for me is just, for anybody, obviously, we know, it's just a long, long time. Now, on top of that, the reason that he has been out is injuries. And the reason he's been out is the fact that he has had a bad back injury, something to do with a disc in his back. He needed surgery. There was a point where he was contemplating retirement. So there's a lot of things there where the 2-year layoff, an injury, how much recovered is he? He's a wrestler. These are kinds of things where you're going to need your back in top condition here if you're about to face another wrestler in that spot. And I think that this is also a spot here where, yes, Malkoun is going to be the more technical wrestler between these two. There's no doubt he has a little bit more technical ability. But I do think that Finney has advantages overall. And the first thing being the fact is his physicality and his strength. And he's a guy that is an absolute ball of muscle. He's going to be very tough to take down. I think he's going to be able to kind of, muscle himself in positions to get control. I think he's going to have that strength advantage over Malkoun in these grappling exchanges, especially, again, if he's going to be, maybe not 100%, coming off injuries, whatever it may be. I think that he's going to find success that way. He's more explosive. He's going to have that strength. And I think he's going to have that wrestling where he's going to be able to find the takedowns, get top control. And one of the other big things here is the fact that Finney is now training full-time with Daniel Cormier. And I think that is just a perfect scenario for him here where he's about to be in a glorified wrestling match, with Jacob Malkoun. And I think this is a spot here where he's going to be able to have a good game plan, fix some of those loose ends that he does have, in his game. We know that neither of these guys have good striking at all. Neither of these guys do have that, but towards Finney, I think he can mix it up a little bit better here and maybe have just a better game plan going into this fight. And, Torres, he's going to bulldoze forward. He's going to throw these big overhands. He's going to crash the pocket. He's going to look for those takedowns. And I do think he's going to be able to wet blanket, Malkoun in certain spots, just having that physicality and that strength advantage. Mixing that back injury with him here, I do think that, Torres can win positionally, get some control time, bank some rounds. So I'm going Torres Finney to win plus 136. So there you have it for my plays for UFC 325. If you want to become a client, link down in the description. Again, check out the offer we have for Caesar Sportsbook in the link down below. And with that being said, let's cash this weekend. Let's dominate. And I'll see you next week. Let's cash.